weight, and we want to get rid of this weight right away. But our body doesn't work like that. It's not healthy to lose 20 pounds in 30 days because you're going to lose a lot of muscles, a lot of your proteins, a lot of your vital minerals. And by the end of these 30 days, if you actually lose those 20 pounds, most likely, chances are that you're going to be on a much better health, on a much worse health than we were when we begin this diet. So changes, the plans that we make to ourselves is not always happens because that's not the best outcome for ourselves. So that's why we want to make some changes in our lives as well. Life doesn't go as planned because most likely what we are deciding, what we are waiting, what we are targeting for ourselves is not the best option for that moment. So plans start to get wrong. Plans start not to be reached. Plans start to get some obstacles in our pathway to reach them because maybe it's not the right time, it's not the exactly outcome that we want for that, and that's okay also. It's part of our life. As human beings, we want to have our problems solved right away. We have no patience to work out our problems, our difficulties, our struggles, our pains on the time frame that they were supposed to be working. We want our solutions right away because we don't like to be suffering. We imagine to ourselves the perfect life. The perfect life that we can wake up every morning for a bright, beautiful day, for a bright sun outside, looking into a beautiful garden with all that green grass that somebody had to cut, not ourselves. Somebody already taking care of that garden, not ourselves. And we wake up for that beautiful day, and then we sit down for breakfast with our family, all with smiles, all talking about good things, making plans for our next trip to Bahamas or something like that, going out for work on a nice brand new car with no traffic, so on US 1 or on Turnpike and nothing like that. And we go to work on a perfect environment where we're going to be with the people that we like it, that we get along, and we work happy for 8 hours. At the end of these 8 hours, we just close our drawers. We go back home with no traffic at all, with a very nice sunset. And then we have some time and we go to the beach and walk to the beach, looking at these birds flying around and the people playing on the beach and everything. And we have this perfect life. Isn't that pretty much what we imagine for ourselves? Isn't that pretty much what we're looking and we picture as a perfect life? But let's be honest. Is that possible? Is that something that we can reach? Is that possible that we can have that much a perfect life? Actually, when we go to the Spirit's book, on the part 4, which says Hope and Consolations. Chapter 1, Earthly Joys and Sorrows. And Allan Kardec asked for the enlightened spirits. Can human beings enjoy complete happiness while on earth? And the answer is very clear. No. But it depends on them themselves to mitigate their misfortunes and be as happy as possible while on earth. So this perfect life that we imagine to ourselves, it is not possible according to the teachings from the enlightened spirits. But meanwhile, is it possible for anyone to enjoy a relative happiness? Most of the time, they are the artisans of their own unhappiness. If they would practice the law of God, they would spare themselves many misfortunes and enjoy a happiness as great as their existence on such a dense plan will allow. But coming back for the previous question, can human beings enjoy complete happiness while on earth? And the answer is just no. But they don't explain too much why that's not possible. So we have an equation that we have to analyze and try to understand why this beautiful picture that we plan to ourselves is not quite possible yet on the stage and on the planet that we're living right now. Because to have a perfect life, you would have to have a perfect situation. How come imperfect spirits living on an imperfect world can have a perfect life? That equation, it doesn't match. To have a perfect life, we would have to have perfect spirits living on a perfect planet, on a perfect environment. Then we would be able to reach the perfect life. On the stage that we are today, on the knowledge that we have today, can we consider ourselves as perfect as possible? Or being honest in our own evaluation, how far are we from this perfection? How can we expect something that we are not prepared for that yet? So, coming back to that equation, we have to develop ourselves to be able to reach that perfect life. But that means that I have to stop on feeding my plans or work on my plans for the future? No. If we want to have the perfect life, we got to do our work inside ourselves right now so we can work and reach that perfection that God is expecting from us. And actually, when we go to the next question, which is the question 921, it is possible for anyone to enjoy a relative happiness if they would practice the law of God. They would spare themselves many misfortunes and enjoy a happiness as great as their existence on such a dense plan will allow. So, if we decided to follow these God's laws, we could have a relatively perfect life, a relatively perfect existence. But where can I find that law? Where the law is written? What kind of library should I go? Or what kind of college should I go to study those laws and to understand those laws? Well, actually, those laws, it's not written in any of these scholar books that we have. We don't have to go to Harvard Law School to understand and to get knowledge of that law. According to the gospel, according to Spiritism, actually, no, not in the gospel, in the Spirit's book, question 621, it says, where is the law of God written? And the answer is very clear, in the conscience. So, since the humans carry God's law on their conscience, why does it have to be revealed to them? Because we have forgotten and disregarded. But God has willed for them to remember. We have the law inside of our conscience, but we get so busy with our earthly lives that we just forget where we can find and how the law was written. But God is so perfect, God is so merciful, that He already knew that we wouldn't be able to understand and to find the laws by ourselves. So when we go to the school today, what is the best way that we can teach a new teaching or a new lesson to someone that goes to the school for the first time? According to the modern scholars and the modern researchers, the best way that you have to learn something is then when you do by yourself. So let's just remember a couple of years ago when we are all in high school, right? A couple of years ago, maybe 3 years, some of you guys were in high school. And when we were in high school, then we had those huge, tremendous algebra classes that I had goosebumps just in remembering that. So we went back to high school and we would have the classes and everything, and the teacher was going to explain how we make the calculus ourselves. But what was the best way to learn it? That was when we go back home and we try to do ourselves. And we had our mind blown by those exercises because we couldn't understand. Then we go back to school and we try again. Then we go back home and we try again. And we go back to school and we try again. And we go back to home and we try again. And we find out, finally we understand the mechanisms and how the laws of mathematics works so we can do the exercises ourselves. The best way to learn it is when we do ourselves. How come we have those athletes nowadays, LeBron James, and the best players in the football league, Tom Brady, or even back in Brazil when we have Pelé, Oscar Schmidt in basketball? What is the secret behind their success? training, practice, training, practice, training, practice, training, practice. Much more than any other under sports. Oscar Schmidt, he has a book that he has written about, I would say 5-6 years ago, and he was explaining how his career was so successful. Well, true is that after the regular training, the regular practice that he had with his own team, after that, or even before the practice, he was already on the field, on the square, playing shoots and playing ball, trying to reach the basketball from 3 feet away. No, not the 3 feet, from the 3 points ring. So he spent hours every day training that fundamental. So that's why he was so perfect on that. He was practicing and he was doing. So God, knowing our difficulties and learning by ourselves, especially because with the difficulties that we have in life nowadays, he had sent someone and he had helped us to see and look at a role model that could guide us through these learning experiences and this learning process. So after we find out that we have the law of God in our consciences, and God has sent someone to remind us and guide us through this process, question 625 of the Spirit's book says, what is the most perfect standard that God has offered to humankind as a guide and model? And this is the shortest answer on the entire Allan Kardec works. Jesus. Just one word. What is the most perfect standard that God has offered to us as a guide and a model? Jesus. Jesus is the highest standard of moral perfection to which humankind may aspire on earth. God offers him as the most perfect model, and the doctrine he taught is the purest expression of God's law. So if we are smart enough to try to understand his teachings and his laws, he will be able to guide us and console us when we are facing difficult times. Because making no mistake about it, all of us, we're going to go through these difficult times. But why we have to go those difficult times? Why we are so important that we suffer on earth? Why are we here to suffer, as most of us like to think or like to say? Well, actually, first of all, we are not here to suffer. We are not here because God likes to make us to suffer. God is a father, very loving and caring father. He doesn't like us to suffer. Let's just forget about the things that we have done in the past, that someday and somehow we will have to get acquainted with the divine justice. God somehow will make us to repair whatever we had done in the past. That we don't remember right now. Let's just forget about that. Let's just think on our regular lives, on our true life. We are immortal spirits that temporarily we are having an earthly experience. As we are immortal spirits and real life, our true life is in the spiritual realm, when we go back to the spiritual realm, how does our life work? According to the Spiritist books, especially by André Luiz and his books that he wrote through Francisco Cândido Xavier. What we can learn about his books? Let's look, just imagine about Nosso Lar, for example, our home, our spiritual home. You guys today, all of you guys, when you pass away, all of you are going to go to Nosso Lar. That's for sure. Because just the charity that you guys are doing, standing over here on this Sunday morning, watching or listening to me, is already a great act of a charity, which guarantees you guys a free ticket to Nosso Lar. That's for sure. So when you pass it away, we are going to back to Nosso Lar. How life works in Nosso Lar. When you get there, most likely, you're going to be seeing or meeting people that already passed away before us, people that are like you, people that we get along, people that were our parents, relatives, or people that lived a great part of our life together with us, that we care about, people that we get along with. Because one of the very first rules of the spiritual life is, we go where our heart is. We go where our mind is. We go with the people that we get along. If we have the same feelings, the same values, the same thoughts, we're going to be together with those people that we have the same feelings and the same values and the same level of involvement that we have. So we go back to nosso lar. When we get there, we're going to find people that we get along. So there is no problems over there. We're going to be living with people that are like us. When we get there, most of them, we have a spare room for us, waiting for us. This person over here, he got to reincarnate next week, so he can come over here and stay with me. So when we go back, we get along with people. We don't have to worry about where we're going to be staying. As you guys are already evolved spirits, most likely when you get back to nosso lar, just a few days we're going to be able to work it again. And as you are evolving, you understand that work is part of our involvement, the never-ending progress. We have to work, so we have to learn, so we got to get new lessons, so we got to evolve it more and more and more. And there is an activity for you guys over back in nosso lar. When we get there, miracle, surprise, we don't have to worry about our own foods. We're going to trim out of the undesirable weight that we carry. There is no chocolate that we have to be concerned about. And we're going to be feeding ourselves with the air, with the love that they have in the ambience and everything. We're going to be feeding ourselves by the light of the sun. So there is a totally different way that we're going to be feeding up ourselves. So we go back to nosso lar. We gotta live with people that we get along. We don't have to worry about a house to live. We don't have to worry about home. We don't have to worry about a job. We don't have to worry about food. We don't have to worry about anything regarding to the material aspects of our lives. So if we don't have to worry about anything about that, where am I going to practice tolerance? How am I going to be practicing patience? How I will be understanding the value of a forgiveness. How I'll be training out my knowledges and my expertise in all of these moral values that Jesus had taught us. It's not in the spiritual life. It's down here. Here is where we put into practice everything that we learned about the moral values that Jesus is teaching us on our never-ending progress and involvement. So we gotta be here, and that's why our life cannot be perfect, because we'll be tried it out. That's how we learn. The lesson to be learned, through learning, we gotta go through it. We gotta live the experience. We gotta live the opportunity to be merciful, to be lovely, to be charitable, to be patient, to be tolerant. How can we be patient? Having a boss that keeps annoying us in our jobs. How can we be tolerant? Having a family member that we have to live with, that person that bothers us. So that's how our life is not perfect, because we got to go through these experiences. But some of the experiences are harder than others. Some of the tryouts that we have and some of the proofs that we have, we suffer more than we would suffer with other situations. And that's when our most likely friend comes to us. And then he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you the rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." When you are facing the most difficult times in our lives, that's most likely when we're going to be looking for Jesus or any kind of spiritual consoling. Anyone that can help us to understand why we're suffering too much or why we go through these so hard experiences. Because pain, it's a very good friend of ours. I would say that pain, it's mandatory in our lives. Because pain is something that comes to us as a wake-up call. Something is not right with you. Something needs to be changed inside of you. Pain, it's mandatory. Suffering, it's optional. But a pain is something that comes to remind you that quite something is not quite right. Needs to be changed. Needs to be readdressed. Needs to be reevaluated. It's the same thing then when we eat a lot of kidneys, for example, that our friend Gary prepares at some time, and we decide not to eat just 1 or 2, but we eat 7 or 8. Well, most likely we're going to have some problems, some stomachal problems that I'll have to take care. So that pain, that discomfort has to remind me that I can't eat 7 kidneys. It's not going to be good for me. So I go to the doctor, I take care of myself. Then for the next time, and I'm going to eat 7. I'm going to just try to control myself, eat just 2 of those wonderful richness kidneys that she prepares. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be actual, or it's going to be asking for way too much in my beyond or my powers to control myself not to eat more than 2. But I have to. So pain was a good advice for me that something was not quite right and I had to change. Something here with our moral pains. Pain comes to tell me that I need to change. The suffering that I have from that, it's up to me. I choose if I want to suffer for that situation or not. If I want to reclaim it, oh, Karen, please, I need to have 7 kidneys every time. Oh, Karen, do something to help me because I need to have those 7 kidneys. Come on, you cannot. You already know that this doesn't work for you. Your body cannot sustain that much sugar and egg yolks and coconut all in a sudden. There's no way that you can process all of these. So you got to change. So if I decided to keep eating those 7 kidneys, the suffering, it's my option, and I'll be responsible for that. But if I decided to change, next time, the pain was my friend, because told me that something needed to be changed. But sometimes we need his help. We need his presence in our lives to tell us on a more gentle way as possible that we needed to reevaluate our lives. When you look into Jesus' works, for example, when you go back to the Bible, when you go back to the New Testament, all of the passages, everything that is related to Jesus, it's consoling itself. All of his words, all of his actions, all of his attitudes, everything that he had done for other people was already consoling. Sometimes he didn't have to do anything. Just his presence, just his energy was already touching people and helping people and consoling people. When we go back to the works of Emmanuel, for example, when he wrote about Paul and Stephen 2,000 years ago, 50 years later, and so forth, all the works of the Spirit in Emmanuel. Emmanuel was someone that saw Christ, had the opportunity to be with him. But besides that, in all of his works, every time that he describes someone that was in touch with Christ, he also describes a profound change and impact that Christ had on that person. Sometimes without even talking or saying anything. Just the power of his love, just of the mercifulness of his words, the way that he was treating people was already touching people. So he was always very merciful, always very kind, always very consoling, because he was more concerned in somebody else's suffering than his own suffering. Word has that during his process of a crucifixion, when he was about to leave his body, he was circumscribed by an unknown number of enlightened spirits. Looked like the entire heaven was coming down to get Christ and get him back into the spiritual realm. But before his last breath, he asked for one of the spirits to go after Judas. How do you say Judas in English? Judas? Yeah. Okay. So he asked for one of the enlightened spirits to go after Judas, because he was concerned that Judas had just killed himself. He wasn't concerned about him. He was concerned that he needed to send some help and support for someone that was suffering far away from him. So if he can do that with his actions Imagine what we can learn from his words as well. He accepted the designation of master because he knew that he was a master. But the most important thing than just saying the things, he lived the sayings that he said. He was living by his own words. He was walking the talk that he was given. Every time that he was asked for, he was given to help. Every time that someone came to him, he had a word or a consoling for that person. He was acting like the one that was always taking care on the people that were around him. If we don't have the Christ presence today, we have much more of his work analyzed. We have the New Testament. We have all of the other works and books from the enlightened spirits that came back to us to explain the sometimes not so easy to understand passages on the Bible and the New Testaments. You have this wonderful work by Emmanuel that explains, sometimes verse by verse, some of the most beautiful and intriguing passages on the New Testament. And when we look into those passages, we can understand exactly what Christ is expecting from us. The understanding of our true nature as immortal spirits, living on earthly experiences that need to be taken care to be evolving to the progress of the future, of the almost never-ending perfection that He's waiting, or God is waiting for us. So if we have that consciousness in us, and we use the consoling that Christ is bringing to us, we are going to be able, for most likely, to end this incarnation or this life that we are living right now much better than when we started. We are not on this life to end this incarnation perfect. We are on this earth to live it better than when we came. And for that, Christ is the consoler, which is going to help us to overcome the difficulties and the hard times and the hard trials that we have, so we can keep track on our progress and our involvement. However, in order for the relief that He offers to take place, it is necessary to put into practice His teachings. Just reading, just knowing, it's not enough. We got to practice. Remember the beginning of the talk that was mentioned about how we learn the lessons, that we got to go through the lessons, we got to practice those teachings and those lessons ourselves so we understand the concept of it. We got to do our part ourselves. Which is his teachings were a true summary of the laws of God, which give meaning to our existence, as well as carrying the light burden of the good deeds, which are characterized by the exercise of love and esteem from the living of these same laws, which are explained and exemplified in the gospel. So the only thing that He's asking for us is the exercise of love, that we put into practice all of His wonderful teachings and everything else. Jesus promises the relief to the afflicted, provided they submit to His yoke. This yoke is the observance of the law taught by Him, which, if well fulfilled, provides reliefs from suffering through faith in the future and trust in the righteousness of God. Righteousness of God. Do we believe in God? If we were here today, I would assume yes, we all believe in God. How is this God that we believe? It's a merciful, loving one, or is someone that we should be fear of, because we never know what is come and if it is going to make us suffer or not. I prefer to believe on a very loving and merciful God, which is much more interested in my growth than on my suffering. With that in mind, can I believe, or can I fulfill the thought that God is not just, that God is not perfect? If I assume that God is perfect and that God is just, then I conclude that there is no mistakes or errors on God's plans. Whatever we go through, that's exactly what God has in mind for us. And He makes no mistakes. We may not understand at the moment, but there is no mistakes in God's plan. If God is just, if God is love, there is a reason behind that. Again, we may not understand on that moment, but there is a reason. But when we look into Jesus and what He had left it to us, then we can understand much better the righteousness of love, or the righteousness of God. We were talking over here about this yoke and the law taught by Christ. What is this law that Christ taught to us? Well, one of the very first laws that He taught, and it fits in our study, is first, my kingdom is not of this world. Jesus has said this. He talks about the future life. He talks about what we're living over here, the immortality of the soul. Actually, Jesus taught us that in my Father's house are many mansions. The different states of the soul, the different categories of the words. It talks about the superior and the inferior words as well. Talking about the progress and never-ending involvement that we have, not just for us, but for the words itself. So when He says that in my Father's mansions, on my Father's house are many mansions, He's saying that there is a lot of other places where we can be living with. When He says that my kingdom is not of this world, He's promising us another kingdom somewhere else, which is not on earth. When He says that except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of heaven, He's promising that we're going to be returning to these never-ending experiences of reincarnation until we can learn all the lessons that we needed to learn. When we have all of these concepts very clear in our minds, we understand much better the consoling role that He has in our lives. Because it's Jesus promising us and teaching us different set of rules that we were used that we are not used before. A different set of rules that clarifies our thoughts and the reasons why we are here. And when we are going through so much painful process or problems or phases in our lives, we got to make it clear that we have these teachings very, very clear in our minds. There is a reason why we're going through this. And if you are having a hard time in believe it, just read and study what I had thought. My kingdom is not of this world. On my Father's house are many mansions. And no one can be the kingdom of God unless it's born again. And if we keep this clear, we're going to see that just what we are seeing right now is just a phase. It's just an experience. It's just a learning that we need for a never-ending process. These are the laws that we need to have clear in our minds. But what happened? Jesus is the governor of this planet. He is the one that received from the hands of God the materials or the nebula from the sun to create, condensate, and form this planet. So He's the governor of our planet. Everything that we have over here was created by the will of Jesus under His plans, by His sidereal engineers that helped to build everything that we have on the physical aspects of our earth, on our globe, including us, our material form, the way that we are formed biologically. It was developed by Jesus. So He knew a thing or two about us and about this earth. And if He knew a thing or two about this earth and about ourselves, He knew also that just His coming and His passage over here maybe wouldn't be enough to clarify all of us on His teachings and what He was expecting from us. During His coming, during His 3 years on earth, teaching everything that He taught, and during His 33 years among us, for sure he touched some people. They were totally and entirely transformed by him just in one incarnation. Maybe Paul of Tarsus would be a good example for that. And although he wasn't as perfect as we expect in someone that we see as an angel, as a guardian angel, or an enlightened spirit, but he evolved a lot. He transformed his entire life to follow Jesus. So he was able to congregate some of these enlightened spirits and transform those ones right immediately. But he needs some more time to do that. A transformation like that, a set of rules just like the ones that he taught us, wouldn't be easy to understand just in about 40 or 50 years, because we cannot forget. Today, life's expectations is about 78 to 82 years, depending on the country that we are living. But back then, the life expectation was 35, 40, 45 years, not more than that. So he knew that it wouldn't be possible for anyone to learn all of this. And that's why he sent some of his prophets ahead of him. That's why he sent all the people that wrote the Vedas. That's why he sent Confucius, Buddha, Plato, Socrates, Moses. All of these were his prophets that came before him with pretty much the same message. Because when we go back to those messages, since the Vedas, 6,000 years before Christ, until Moses, or until Plato and Socrates, 400 years before him, if you take the core of the message, it's exactly the same. Exactly the same. So all of his prophets that came before him came to already announce what he had to teach. And the prophets that came after him also came with the message to remind what he had done. Francis of Assisi, for example, Joan of Arc, and also all the other prophets that we had after him. But he knew that just one incarnation wouldn't be enough. So that's why he made his second promise as the consoler. If you love me, keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another consoler to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot accept, because it neither sees him or knows him. But you know him, for the lives with you and will be within you. But the consoler, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I have said to you. And when we look into this passage, and these we have also on the Gospel according to Spiritism. Spiritism has come at the predicted time to fulfill Christ's promise. Presided over by the Spirit of truth, it calls humanity to observe the law and reveals all manner of things so make understandable what Jesus had said only in parable form. Back. Senhor, I need your help. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Froze? Okay, not a problem. Christ himself had given the warning. Listen, all those who have ears to hear. Spiritism has come to open men's eyes and ears because it speaks without figuration or allegory. So lifting up the veil, which had been intentionally cast upon certain mysteries. Finally then, it has come to bring supreme consolation to the disinherited of this earth, and to all who suffer, by showing them the just cause of their suffering and the useful purpose of all pain. And it's important to say that Spiritism was not the doctrine that invented all of these concepts of reincarnation, or life after death, or communication between both worlds, or living in other planets, and these kind of things. Spiritism was the one who got the message from the enlightened spirits, studied it, understood it, and set a set of teachings that guide us through this never-ending moral process that we have to learn. It wasn't a Spiritism invention. Because if you go back to Vedas, to Confucius, to Buddha, to Plato, to Socrates, to Moses, to all of them, most of these teachings are already taught by them. We cannot forget about the Egyptians, that they firmly believe in the life after death. That's why they built the pyramids. That's why their pharaohs and the most important people were buried with their personal things. So when they wake up in the next life, they would have the things already with them. So this concept of the immortality of the soul and everything else is not something that Spiritism just created. It was invented by Spiritism. Spiritism just explained it. That's all. It was not a Allan Kardec creation. It was just his explanation for the facts and the phenomena that in the first hand can just see something marvelous, or that is just a few privileged could have it. But if just a few privileged could have access to that, or could be blessed by this, would God be unjust? Just giving the privilege for one or the other, for the chosen ones, for the ones that he likes the most? Would be he being God if he would be doing that? Most likely not. Also, we understand for this passage, and to wrap up our talk today, and this is something that I personally, I think it's one of the best passages that we have on the entire gospel. I am the great physician of the souls, and I have come to bring you the remedy that will cure. The weak, the suffering, and the sick are my favorite children, and I come to save them. Come then to me, all who suffer and find yourselves oppressed, and will be alleviated and consoled. God directs a supreme appeal to your hearts by means of Spiritism. Thus, in the future, when you have become humble and submissive to the Creator, we will keep His divine law. God directs a supreme appeal to your heart by means of Spiritism. Thus, in the future, when you have become humble and submissive to the Creator, you will keep His divine law. That's one of the problems that we have. We don't submit ourselves to our Father. That's why we keep making plans that are most likely, or sometimes, is not exactly what He had planned to us. And our life keeps changing on His will, not on ours. That's why we have some surprises during our lives that we are planning to go in this way. Now, all of a sudden, everything changes and we got to be going to that pathway, not the one that we had chosen before, but that one, because God knows that that one is much better for us. That one is the one that we need. But we keep fighting with Him because we think that this one over here is the best one. And we do not accept His commandments and His guidance. When we are humble enough to accept what God has to offer to us, all of these problems and struggles that we go through, they're going to fall apart. It's going to be just like scrambling. They will not sustain itself. Because if you will have faith enough to throw ourselves in the pathway that God is changing or showing us, all of this suffering, it won't be necessary anymore. But we keep trying to play God. We keep trying to think that we know more than God. So that's why we still have to go through these experiences and learning sufferings. On the next passage, the Spirit of Truth says, abnegation and resignation are a continuous prayer
and contain profound teaching. Human wisdom resides in these two words. Would that all suffering spirits could understand this truth. So take these words for your motto: devotion and abnegation, and will be strong as they resume all the obligations which charity and humility impose. The sentiment of fulfilled duty will give repose and resignation to our spirits. So when we apply the devotion and the abnegation on our lives, we'll be giving our lives, or we're going to be giving ourselves to the will of God. And when we follow the will of God, for sure, that's because He wants the best for us. And when we are strong enough to feel and to give ourselves to Him, all of this suffering will just disappear. I really wish that you guys can take it back home with you today. The very bright sun which is outside, that sun can start to bright inside our minds and our hearts. Then we can illuminate our thoughts, and we can have these teachings of Jesus the Consoler as the guidance and the motto of our lives from now on. Do we have to go through pain? Yes. Do we have to suffer? No. Is pain a friend of ours? Yes. Can we learn out of these? For sure we can. But when we give ourselves to the will of God, that's the best way that we can take our life from now on. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you.